I want to thank everybody for coming today. It's always so good to share information among countries and hear each other. And excuse me, I think this panel is going to be really interesting because we're going to hear from, I think, 6 different countries at least. So first, and I'm a panelist as well. I think, maybe I'll start, is where John had me. But I want to introduce everybody else. There is Richard Combs, who is Deputy CEO of the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society and IAF Secretariat. We have Alexis Gunderson, member of the Task Force on Generative AI at the National Writers Union. Florence Piriou, who's Secretary General from La Sofia in France. Josefine Engström, am I saying that right? Yeah. Engström, the president of Svenska Tecknare in Sweden. And I'm going to totally bastardize your name. Apologies in advance. Sihawukele, Ngubane. I'm going to let you say how your name is.
I'm Sihawukele Ngubane. The name Sihawukele means have mercy.
Oh, okay, beautiful. He is chair of the Academic and Nonfiction Authors of South Africa. So welcome. I think this will be a really super interesting conversation. So I do have a PowerPoint. If you want to load it. Lewis. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Now, a lot of what I'm going to say has already been covered, so we'll skip over quite a bit. So, first of all, we've heard today and talked about the fact that, and it's something the Authors Guild very much believes, is that the business of writing is very much at risk with generative AI if we don't put up appropriate guardrails. And I think we've all been very busy trying to figure out what those guardrails are and how we might get legislators and courts to agree with us. And generative AI, as we've heard, was built on the work largely of professional writers. And that is who the professional writers, I believe we need to say the professions, otherwise we could end up in a world of a lot of hobbyists. So we have already seen an explosion in the US of AI generated copycat books on Amazon, also on Google Play and Barnes and Noble. And Umair talked a little bit about that earlier. We're seeing these biographies, workbooks, and summaries. They get posted right next to the real book, sometimes before the real book comes out or the day of. They're clearly AI generated. For now, by and large, the content has not been very good, but it is getting better and better. They have one purpose, these books, and that's to steal sales. People do buy them by mistake. We're only at the beginning of this. With the new GPT Turbo, anyone can use AI to spit out a decent text of up to 300 pages now. You can also input 300 pages and ask GPT to summarize it, change maybe the voice. You can make derivative works of entire books this way. And we've already started seeing some of that. For instance, Stephanie Land, she wrote a book called Made, which was a bestseller. It was about her experience before she started writing, of being a young mother, single, and having no work. It was made into a TV series. She just published a new memoir, Class. Within a couple days of the publication date, there were over half a dozen AI generated books. Now, we were able to get Amazon to take those books down, but then more popped up. And one of them, they refused to take down initially. And I don't know, I'm looking for Umair if they've gotten back to us about it yet, because it was so good. They said it didn't violate their quality rules. So a lot of the AI generated materials been taken down because it's so low quality. And they do have a rule that there's got to be a certain level of quality. It's not very high. But this book looked to them like a real book. It was a biography. What was clear to us from looking at it, all they had done was put her book into an AI generator and say, it's a memoir. Thank you, sweetheart. Turn it from a memoir, first person, to second person and make it a biography. And so there's a biography with all the same content that's being sold. We're just going to see more and more of this. And in fact, every one of our board members, and we have a lot of board members, we have like 70, every single one of them that's had a new book come out has had the same problem. As soon as the book comes out, there are multiple AI generated books up alongside it. And Umair pointed this out also, that we're already seeing many writers lose much needed supplemental income from copywriting and journalism. And that half of most authors' income comes from these other types of sources. We are losing those jobs already. There was a recent study that looked at 3 months of job listings for freelancers by type and found that due to AI, the greatest losers by far were writers. And translators, I should say, where there was a 33% drop in the number of jobs in just several months. So we do have a problem. So what are we doing about it in the US? So we've been lobbying a lot with other US groups in the room. We brought the litigation with many of the authors that we work closely with, council members and other members, with Scott Shoulder, who spoke about that. We are working on establishing collective licensing for authors, and we've also put out best practices, among other things. And the Authors Guild, we have a page on our website that's just authorsguild.org/AI. And we try to put all of our resources somewhere on that page. So if you could turn the page, thank you. So we've been lobbying in DC for over a year, and we've had a variety of different requests. Sometimes I feel like we're just throwing, things at the wall to see what'll stick, but whatever stopgap measures that we can think of. And I'd love, if we have time to talk afterwards, to hear from, all of you about what you think the most important thing is that we can do to try to, sort of ensure that the creative professions remain vibrant. So we have asked for AI generated content to be labeled so consumers know what they're buying. So we're framing it as much as creative protection as consumer protection, which goes over well in Congress. And we've gotten a number of members are very interested in this, and we've seen some legislation. As others have talked about, we want transparency in training data. We also want a right of publicity type of right that will prevent the use of authors' names in connection with the dissemination of AI generated materials, so that their name cannot be put falsely on AI generated material. We do, in case we lose these cases, we will need clarification that training on copyrighted works is not fair use. I think we're going to win our case, thanks to Scott and all our lawyers' very good work. But there is a chance that we might lose in some of these cases. We also need the ability to negotiate collectively with AI companies. And if I have time, I'll talk a little bit about that. In the US, we do have this issue that it's not clear for trade books who owns the rights, the publisher or the authors. We're arguing over that now with the publishers. But one problem that we have whenever we're talking about rights to out-of-print books is that once they go out of print, though, the author has the right to reclaim the rights. They don't often do what's necessary. And there's often a lack of certainty around who owns those rights to those older books. So we would love an automatic reversion if the book's been out of print for more than 10 years. Next slide, please. So we have been working on, God, it seems like maybe a dozen bills with different staffers. And the bills that we've been working on are all around the transparency that we spoke about, right of publicity, the labeling. The bullet got lost there, labeling AI generated content. And also, requiring licensing. Next slide, please. So there have been a number of bills already introduced that we have endorsed, and I think some of the other groups in this room may have too. The Protecting Consumers from Deceptive Acts, that is requiring, that's a labeling bill. And it actually, I like this bill because it also it directs the National Institute of Standards and Technology to facilitate standards development, which I think will go a long way towards doing so, because it's labeling AI generated material is not as clear cut as you might think it might be, particularly with text, because watermarks are so easy and metadata are so easy to strip out of text. So text is behind images and sound, actually. Then we've got the AI Labeling Act. We've got an AI Foundation Model Transparency Act, which is on disclosure of training data. Also forming, this will form committees to determine what should be made public, et cetera. Section 230 is a law that was passed with the internet platforms, along with the DMCA. It doesn't apply to copyright, but it applies to all the other types of torts that an AI platform's users might engage in. And it says it treats the AI platform as just a mere publisher and acts as a safe harbor from liability. This act would clarify that it does not apply to AI, so that AI platforms would be responsible for the acts of their users. And that has a lot of support as well. Next slide. Oh, this is just our case. Scott already talked about it. Next slide. So we have been developing best practices for authors. We've had a lot of requests for this. I will give the credit where it's due to Umair, has done most of the work on this. A lot of it's FAQs, just information for authors about, how to find out if your book's been used, what you can do about it, that sort of thing. But we also have sort of some ethical guidelines for authors. And I thought I'd mention a few, and I'd love to get feedback. So one, we recommend, yes, it's fine to use AI as an assistant for brainstorming, editing, refining ideas, but not as the primary source for your work. And with that, as we mentioned, the goal of maintaining, the unique spirit of human creativity. Use AI to support, not replace the process. We also do say all over these best practices, whenever you use AI, be mindful of the fact that any AI you're using right now is probably trained illegally without consent and without compensation. So we don't really encourage AI use until we can get it licensed. We also say write in your own voice, even if you do use AI generated text, rewrite it in your own voice. If you do use AI to generate any text, characters, or plot, you have to disclose it to your publisher. In fact, that's in your agreement. They have to disclaim it in the copyright registration, as we heard earlier. And we don't think it's necessary though to disclose if you're just using it as a tool to brainstorm, ideate, that sort of thing. We also ask that you respect the rights of other writers. Don't use AI to copy or mimic their styles or voices. fact check everything that comes out of an AI system, of course, be aware of bias. And then we also ask authors to show solidarity with other professional creators, including voice actors, narrators, translators, illustrators, etc. We do have some recommended clauses for publishing contracts that are, you may not use my work. This is the author to the publisher. Can't use my work without my permission to train AI. Cannot use AI to narrate an audiobook without my permission. Cannot use AI to translate without my permission. And also you can't use AI generated artwork. And those, the latter three are really to stand in solidarity with our co-creators. Next slide, please. So we have been surveying our members, and Umair gave a couple of figures from that. This is from our most recent survey in December, November, December. And this question here is, would you be willing to license your works to AI companies to train AI if you can control the output uses? Meaning the AI company would agree to block the ability to use prompts and get outputs for things such as in the style of such an author, to use the name of your titles and prompts, that sort of thing. And interestingly, 38% said yes, 32% said no, and 29% said, I don't know, which is quite understandable. So, but with a little over a third, which is not as much as I think you found, we still think there's a basis for doing this. Now, we do not have any kind of statutory basis for collective licensing in this country for text, particularly for AI use. It has to be voluntary. Early on, when we were lobbying for AI amendments, we were asking for an extended collective license. We were asking for any kind of statutory license, and we got a lot of pushback from the industries. In fact, we found that the recording industry, under the Campaign for Human Artistry, which we were all members of, was lobbying against us. So in any event, it became impractical to try to get any kind of legislation on statutory licensing. And by statutory licensing, it's literally a collective license that's in a statute. So we are going forward with opt-in, market-based collective license. We have hired a company to help us build a collective licensing platform. And when I say us, could you turn to the next slide? Thanks. I'm actually mean the Authors Registry, which is a sister organization of ours. It collects licensing fees from Europe, mostly from ALCS, thank you, and distributes to US-based authors. So we'll be working with a company that will build a platform. They will be the CMO, but we are probably going to be distributing the monies to US authors. We will also be asking authors to join. So we will be doing a big campaign to try to get authors to join. Of course, it's all going to depend on how much. And that is the big question that everyone seems to have in licensing right now. So we are working with people who've been involved in some licensing already to sort of see what we need: a willing buyer and a willing seller. So you need authors who are willing to do this, and you need AI companies who are willing to license at the price point, because this is going to be totally market-based. Wish us luck. One of the reasons we're doing this is that in the fair use analysis, there are 4 factors, as you've probably all heard, and the 4th factor is the potential harm to the value or the market for the work. And in a situation like this, where a lot of the market is going to be licensing and licensing fees, you need to establish that there is a licensing market or the potential for one. So we need to show that a collective license from authors, so that AI companies don't have to go author to author to author, is feasible and doable, and we're going to make it happen. So I think, why don't you go to the next slide, but I think I'm going to just end there, other than to say that another one of our very important proposals, which is tangentially related to AI, is on collective bargaining. It has become so clear to me ever since I've been at the Authors Guild that we need the ability to collectively bargain. Writers and other authors, other freelance writers do not have the right to collectively bargain. We would be sued for antitrust, or could be, if we were to act collectively, for instance, even to boycott, though we may be testing the boundaries of that soon. So we need this exemption, and we do have a proposal. We call it the Freelance Author and Artist Labor Act, that would allow professional freelance creators to collectively bargain in the same way that employees can. And our principal draft would be under our National Labor Relations Act. A number of other creative groups have signed on to it. As you can see, I've got the list on the screen, including the Graphic Artists Guild, which is a member of IAF and National Writers Union. Who else is here? I think that's it. Anyway, so that's all for me. Thank you. And now I will turn to, who's next on our list? You're okay. There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Richard Coombs. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive at ALCS, and we're the collective rights management organisation in the UK for writers, as I'm sure you know. We work very closely with DACs in the UK and with other licensing bodies. So some of what I say will build on things that Christian's already covered. But as I'm in a room full of writers and writers' bodies, I thought I'd focus on the narrative and try and get at the stories behind what is putting the pressure on the regulatory system, or lack of it, in the UK as we currently see it. And the way I've structured the slides is just to look at the sort of past, present, and future. But I'm crossing my fingers that it's not a 3-act tragedy where all the authors are left dead at the end because their work has all been taken and they've died of malnutrition. So hopefully that's not happening. But if we look at the first slide, please. So just a little bit of background to get to where we have got to in the UK, such as it is. So 2 or 3 years ago, there was a consultation by our Copyright Office, the Intellectual Property Office, and they looked at 2 questions, and they went way back to 1988 when the current act was established. And there is something in our act, in our copyright legislation, that provides coverage for computer-generated works. But this was way before the days of generators and transformers and everything that we've been talking about today. This was like word processing. It was just, you know, you've used something to spell check or print out your work. But it was interesting that it was suddenly back in the news again 2 or 3 years ago. And as I think it was Barbara said earlier, the regulators are way, way behind the tech companies in terms of seeing what's coming and actually addressing it properly. The other question that the office raised in the consultation was about the text and data mining exception, which we've had in the UK since 2014. And because of Brexit, we didn't have the extended versions of the TDM exceptions that we've got in the Digital Single Market Directive, and obviously not the AI Act either. So we've got a very limited TDM exception there, which is quite clearly for things like research. It's not for big companies to make billions, if not trillions off. But as I say, 2 or 3 years ago, we had the start of this conversation in the UK. If we fast forward a bit further to where it came out, there was actually 4 options put on the table by the office. And they went for the most extreme one. The first option was about better licensing, a better licensing framework, and then there were variations of opt-ins and opt-outs, but the final option was a broad exception for everything commercially. And at the time, this was expressed for being for text and data mining. But as we've seen with the AI Act in the last year or so, TDM has become generative AI by sort of osmosis or something. None of us really understood when we were talking about the DSM directive 7 or 8 years ago that we were going to be talking about generative AI in a few years. But these regulations have sort of leaped in that direction. And I think this is what was happening in the UK. And it very much brings home the point that we've talked about, where governments see the huge commercial investment and return from technology, but don't think too much about the other side of the equation, which is the creative industries that this technology is effectively leeching off into create these products. In the UK, the creative industries are worth 120 billion a year by government estimates, a huge pillar of the economy. So it was a fairly short-sighted policy, and following fairly strong pushback from the copyright community on all sides, it was withdrawn. So we're sort of in a bit of a vacuum now, but if I could get the next slide up, I'll just sort of talk through that. So as Christian mentioned, the next plan, then having not got this exception through, was to establish a code of practice and have roundtables with rights holders and with AI companies to try and come up with a sort of roadmap, some guardrails, some rules. It was not a success, as Christian said. It was this kind of standoff, really. And no one was prepared to say anything. And actually, the officials said in meetings to us, the Copyright Office people said, we're kind of just waiting for a judicial moment on this so that we know where we're going as well. And I think that's kind of where we all are in a way. So they then abandoned this code of practice idea. And the latest that we've heard is that there'll be a document in the coming weeks, possibly months. We do know transparency points will be in there. We don't know what else, but there are sort of, let's talk about a direction of travel and options being reviewed. So pretty vague, and it doesn't suggest that there'll be a big plan coming out of the UK this side of the general election for regulation. Christian mentioned the Lord Holmes has put a bill into our parliament, setting out a broader regulation that would also cover intellectual property. But that's something that we call a private member's bill. It's not come from the government. It's just something there to sort of say to the government, in effect, come on, you need to deal with this. It's a stimulus for debate rather than actual legislation. So realistically, if we have a general election towards the end of this year, it's likely that the next government, so we anticipate a Labour government, will pick this up. We think as a sort of creative community that has concerns we're trying to articulate on this, we'll have a much better audience in the next government, but they will still have the same economic realities to deal with. So we still imagine they want to back technology, but we think they might get the more balanced point about the importance of creators and the creative economic social capital that creativity brings to the UK and to all of our regions. We have only one case that's sort of on the slate in the UK at the moment, but I think it tells us a bit about this sense of the kind of narrative that's developing around this. In that, if we look at the pictures of the football players earlier, this idea of a chain of sequential copying looks quite plausible, I would say. And Stability's defense, or the second bit after they got over the jurisdictional point, saying it's not copying because it's back propagation. Quick show of hands, who in the room knows what back propagation is? No, me neither. Any fans of encoded model weights? I mean, this is, I think, what we're going to see. It's static, it's noise, it's a lot of obfuscation to sort of say, look, this isn't copying. And maybe it isn't copying as we know it, but it's certainly use. And I think the other interesting point the judge has to weigh, apart from the enormous burden of deciding the first UK case on fair dealing rules, they'll also be asked to test this new exception for pastiche, parody and caricature that we've had for only 7 or 8 years. So, I mean, good luck with that, really. There's a lot there that is going to be precedential. And if we could go to the next slide, I think it's not going to be the end of the story either, because I'm sure it'll be appealed, etc. So where are we actually going with this? I mean, these are best guesses really, but we've talked about licensing, and in the UK, we're working through our RRO, the Copyright Licensing Agency. I think my broader point here is that I feel quite fortunate to be part of a long-standing established setup with authors, visual artists, publishers all talking about this. I think the danger for all of us here is the possibility of some divide and conquer by the leading sort of LLM companies who maybe pick off the biggest, most solvent publishers, other copyright holders, and authors gets less time. We've seen this in other contexts. We must avoid that happening again. So there's an organization challenge here, and I think RROs, where we have them, are a good place to organize around. So we're looking at models. As ALCS, we'll be doing our own survey later and looking at what Dax has done, looking at what Mary showed for the Guild. And the more that time goes on, the better the questions we can ask, because the more we understand the sort of options that we can put out there for licensing. And we need to test the sort of tolerance and the comfort levels that our members have for what they will go with. But I still think even now there's a lot of difference between the idea that Mary said of can you write me something in the style of, which is clearly a sort of competitive issue, compared to things maybe like Copilot, which is LLM backed, but it's part of the MS suite that everyone is using every day. It's part of life. So perhaps people would be more comfortable with some sort of compensation for something like that. I think something else that's going to be around as part of the narrative of this ongoing to and fro and push and pull about what's copying, and is this actually like a sui generis place we're going into, and do we need to reconsider if this is something that needs global regulation, say this is different and we need new rules. But for now, if you just look at two bits from the 88 wording of the UK legislation, what we're looking at is copying that's reproducing the work in any material form. But as we've already discussed this afternoon, that works in the old world of reproductive copying, where you can see the copy at the end of it, but we're in a different world now. So I think there's argument to be made around that. There's an interesting line at the end of the copying section in the UK statute, which is a sort of footnote that says, well, the making of copies is sort of transient or incidental to some other use of the work. That's also copying. And that maybe brings us a little bit closer to what we're talking about and what our propagation and encoding and all of that is about as well. So I think it's important that we put down markers. So we're looking at getting things like council's opinion or good, strong academics that are on board with copyright and are supportive of it, to put their views out there as well and try and sort of lead the thought process on this. All of which takes us to a new government coming in the UK. I think we need to give them probably into next summer to get their feet under the table, but we're already talking to the people, we call them shadow ministers, but the opposition parties in the culture ministry and the science and technology, which now has ownership of copyright. And I think they will want to consult more and talk more about this, but we need to put models in front of them and show that we can do these things. There was an article in Wired that I'm sure a lot of you saw last year that was like a roundup of all the tech companies' arguments for why you shouldn't worry about copyright or licensing. And quite near the top of the list was, it's too difficult, there's too much to license, and the bits of money that will eventually get through to people will be insignificant. I mean, we've been doing this for decades. We actually can make licensing work and get meaningful money back to individual creators. So we need to be telling government that, so that these arguments don't take root. And we get the policy we need. But I think that will take some time in the UK. As I think we're all saying, everyone is sort of waiting for someone to make a move judicially and we'll see a decision, but it's in the High Court in the UK. There's a few stages of appeal, possibly settlement as well. So that's where we are in the UK.
Thank you. Okay, next we will hear from Alexis Gunderson, who will also talk about developments in the US, but from a slightly different perspective from the freelance journalists, if I'm correct.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. So I am a digital media worker through and through. I know we've had a lot of PowerPoints today, and I'm sorry to tell you, I didn't have it in me. I did an arts and crafts project, so I'm going to pass these around. I don't have anything for us to look at on the screen. Alex. I think I have almost enough or just enough. I just printed them off my home printer and folded them before I got on the train. So hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Gunderson. My pronouns are she and her. I'm an organizer with the Freelance Solidarity Project, which is the digital media division of the National Writers Union. And so that is the division of workers whose work is rooted really deeply in the digital landscape and all of the pitfalls and opportunities that come with that. We've been organizing within the National Writers Union since about 2018. For anyone who pays attention to American labor organizing trends, that's about the time that a bunch of staff media unions were gearing up with WGAE, Writers Guild of America East, and also News Guild. And a lot of those freelancers saw their colleagues in New York, here in New York City, organizing and getting union protections. And we're like, we want some of that. What can we do? And so they started working together to form the project and joining with the National Writers Union. As a couple people have mentioned, there are some hurdles to organizing as freelance workers of any sort in the United States. We are coded as small businesses, basically. And so there's antitrust legislation to contend with, which is why we're so glad to be on the same page as Mary and the AG with the need to allow space antitrust exemptions for freelance workers to collectively bargain. And to echo something that Christian said earlier, these points in this arts and crafts project that I'm sending around, we also worked as a member-led working group last year, developing a principles and policy platform on generative AI. And so that's what's being circulated, and it's been really heartening to see all throughout today a lot of the same points be brought up again and again. We are really all of us on the same page, in the same boat, even on different continents, even in different mediums. So one of the things I wanted to, one of the reasons I'm really glad that we've been given space as the National Writers Union, even though, I mean, that's doubling up North American representation. I apologize for that, but there are a lot of things that have to do with the way that labor operates for freelance workers, especially in the digital media era, that doesn't slot into a lot of the conversations we've been having today, or where there are gaps for some of the solutions that have been offered that wouldn't cover just this huge swath of workers. In the United States, about a third of workers do freelance work of some sort, meaning like file 1099s with the government during tax season. And that's just, it's a lot of workers. It's a lot of people who could be left in the gaps if we're not thinking about them when it comes to problem solving, solution finding with something like this. In the case, we've had a lot of conversation today about copyright and licensing, and that's all really important. But one of the contexts in the United States that we're working within is that freelance workers in digital media spaces particularly end up with contracts that we call work for hire contracts. And so if anyone's not familiar with that, work for hire basically gives whoever the, not employer, but whoever the commissioning organization is, they get your rights forever and ever. And a lot of freelancers are not, we see contracts and we run away. Like that is not what we're in that is not what we're out for. That legalese is very alienating. It is by definition, or, by design, it's alienating. And a lot of people, me included, end up with work for hire contracts without even knowing what it is, let alone that it was there. And for me, I'm a TV critic, so my my review of whatever season of whatever show, the fact that whatever digital publisher owns that forever and ever, Netflix isn't going to come try to option that into a series. I'm pretty safe. But for my colleagues who do really meaty, juicy, interesting features or investigative reporting, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room has seen at least one documentary that was based in a news story, or fictionalized, drama, really juicy drama that's based in a news story. If that freelancer didn't do a good job getting their rights back from their original contract, they won't have made any money off of that. And that extends to any of these collective licensing schemes or the copyright issues. As difficult as it will be to resolve those problems for the people for artists who already are the rights holders for their own work, there are just that many more obstacles for freelancers like me, like several of my colleagues and comrades are here today who don't own the rights. And so that would end up being, you know, then the publishers would benefit from those, from whatever remuneration comes through those fields. One of the most useful for me, most useful like visualization tools for why this matters or how this can look is Barbie Sargent, who's the original artist behind Strawberry Shortcake. She designed it for American Greeting in 1979 as a freelancer. And she wasn't the artist who did the final design when it was being licensed and turned into the cartoon that many of us in this room, I'm sure, would recognize at a drop. But she did the original 4 drawings, and it was under a work for hire contract. And she went through many years of litigation and trying to resolve that, not to much success. But here's an opportunity where if we had a collective licensing scheme that took into consideration artists whose original work was captured under work for hire when generative AI didn't exist, wasn't a thing that anybody would have any understanding of or way to anticipate, like she wouldn't benefit from that. She would still not be seeing any remuneration for Strawberry Shortcake drawings, having trained visual systems. And so that was a really, when I thought of that, like that, when that came past my, my screen last summer, it was just really evocative and helped me understand kind of what the issues are, especially outside of text. So one of the things I also wanted to point out is it's come up a couple times that with the freelance writing, that it can be a supplementary income to artists who are novelists or working in other fields or like doing bigger projects. But a lot of freelancers choose it. A lot of people choose that as their career. It is 100% of their career. And then I hope the media industries in your respective countries are doing better than ours. Ours is on life support. Ours is not doing well. It is failing more and more each year. It's protracting more and more. And one of the easiest bits of overhead for the bosses to cut is staff writer jobs, because what they can do in the US is turn them to freelance, get content from freelance writers, and have to pay so much less because they don't have to worry about benefits or any of the other things that are protected under labor law for staff writers under a union contract, or even not a union contract, just a contract. And so there are more and more people who are ending up in freelancing, not by their own volition, and their work deserves to be protected too. So I know I don't know exactly how much time I have. I don't want to take we've got a lot more people to hear from still. I do want to say that even when freelancers do manage to gain control of their own IP, the current situation with registering your copyright in the US is wonky and annoying and unhelpful. Scott noted that in the last panel, or a couple panels ago, that so the point is, even if you technically own your rights just by creating it and having it out in the world, it's not really enforceable unless you've registered it. And you mentioned, maybe it was you who mentioned photographers, is that's a pretty tough case because you can have such a huge portfolio. And even if you do remember that there is a way to do a batch registration, $50 is still a lot for those batches. And as a writer, okay, back to TV criticism, I might on average get paid $150 for a review. So if I manage to retain my own rights to register it, like, that's an enormous chunk of that fee. It's not worth the time and the effort, even if it was worth the money. And then oh gosh, maybe Christian pointed, I can't remember, everyone's been making such good points. Then being able to pursue that even as an individual is really tough. It's beyond feasible, beyond the scope of what's feasible. So, I mean, I'm coming to everyone today from the perspective of a labor organizer. That is my role. I am on the steering committee, so I do have some leadership stuff going on in my life, but I think of myself primarily as an organizer. That's what I write on my business cards. That's what I write on my emails. And I really think that the solution to a lot of these problems has to come through organizing, and organizing across a lot of different sectors and across a lot of different topics. Legislative wins would be great. Licensing wins would be great, but it can't, and it just won't be everything, even if it could be everything. there are a lot of things that we can do to educate each other, to do peer-to-peer education. I think people have heard the phrase each one teach one. There are a lot of artists out there. There are a lot of writers out there. There are a lot of creatives out there who don't know things. And I think it's incumbent upon us who are in the rooms to learn the things and who are gaining the knowledge to share them with each other, to see that as part of our calling, to make sure that we are all educated. Like, I want to make sure that other freelancers know what work for hire is so that they can try to get it out of their contracts, and to know what would happen if generative AI was able to snatch their writing and what they could do instead to protect themselves. There are also things that we can do to educate small businesses or places that would want to use AI because they can't afford to pay an artist. And they have good intentions because they'd say, like, we would pay artists if we were a big enough company, but we just can't. So we're going to use AI instead. I'm not sure that there's a legislative solution to that. There's not an approach to that. I think it has to be more social, cultural, reputational, something where we are pushing people to think of AI as not the solution, whether that's through leaning on their better angels or leaning on the worse angels. One of the things that we can do also is, I love, Mary, that you brought up the contract clause, the model contract language you got. I'm going to hit you up for that afterwards. There are also ways, I think, if anyone was watching any news at all last summer, it's all you could watch because entertainment wasn't being made because the Writers Guild of America was on strike. And one of the reasons that their strike held out for so long was that they were really working to get protections against AI built into their contracts. And that is another place where there can be really, that is an enforceable win. That's not legislation. That is not licensing. But it is legally enforceable. And there are a lot of unions out there and a lot of union contracts that can be negotiated with generative AI protections in mind. And then there are also, like, I don't know if guerrilla would be the right way to describe it, but there are ways that as creative people, we can fight back in a more creative way. Paulina, I have no idea if I should have asked this question earlier. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there is Nightshade and Glaze. Have you heard of those tools? Yeah, so Nightshade and Glaze are tools that artists can download that basically poison individual pixels in their art, so that if that work gets scraped and put into an AI engine, the AI engine is going to misread it and spit out complete nonsense, and it's almost impossible to pull it out. So there are creative approaches that, especially for creative-minded people, that we can come up with ways to counter this. This is all a bunch of different types of way off the beaten path of what we've been talking about today, but I did want to give a perspective on some of the things that we're doing in the United States that is not specifically rooted in legislative challenges, that's not specifically rooted in copyright issues or licensing, and really I wanted to give a window into what we're trying to do from an organizing perspective. And that's it.
So now we will move away from the US and UK and we'll turn to France. Florence.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this day. It's wonderful to hear about how US and you are so in advance about this topic. In Europe, it's very different because, in fact, we learn after, but we accepted the exemption in the UC directive. You know, it was during the 2019, but the debate has been yet, it was during 2 years before. And the directive, in fact, implement two exemption. Then member states shall provide an exemption. Shall means that you're not obliged to do, but it was Article 3, text and data mining for the purposes of scientific research. And the other one came at the last of the debate, as usual, and it was about other subject matter. And the first condition for both, it's that you can reproduce text, data. When they say data, it could be photographic and other subject matter of works, could be neighboring rights also. but it came from sources, legal sources. And in the Article 4, they said also legal sources, but except if the work has been expressly reserved by the right holders, and they have to do something positive to make an opt-out. You have to know to put a meta tag, and because the machine, the robot has to know that you have done an opt-out. Then next slide, please. These transposition were 2 years after, and a few years after in 2021. As you know, we didn't know yet how much how the AI algorithm will be so powerful and will replace some sectors in the creation. But we did like we were very good people. We had the 2 exemption in France. First for scientific purpose, solely scientific research. You can make data mining and reproduce whatever you want without the permission of authors. You understand? And the second exemption, it's about whatever the purpose of a search. They don't say commercial, but it's quite off. And the author has objected if you can't do it if the author, they don't say the right holders in the French law. That means that the author has to object it, and in an appropriate manner. That means also that you have to make publicity on the website online that the robots can identify that you have opt-out. Then 2 exceptions made in June 24 on the 2021. And at the last, in the reality, please, the next slide. I said that because I was organizing LAE Congress, and about the exception, yes, the condition of the commercial uses. You can if the work is from legal sources. You can't do it if authors or publishers claim its right of opt-out, and the opt-out has to be with a meta tag. This is the condition, and the French publishers says to the members, put in tools like some of them created by W3C. I'm not a high-tech consultant, but I know that a lot of publishers they know about that, but it's quite difficult to implement it. And what they said, that they put a meta tag on their website, but you need to inform also all the distributor, Amazon, and they don't do that. They don't do. Then we have a blocked. The opt-out can work on your website, but elsewhere it's very difficult to be respected. Then what's next, please? It's the AI reality, as you know, and I organize the LAE Congress with professor of copyright in France, and the subject was intelligence artificial, but it was made 5 years or 6 years before COVID, you know, and we didn't know what to talk about. But in 2022, as you know, it has been launched, ChatGPT, DeepL, Daily, everything has been democratized access, and we were stupefied, in fact, that because we hear about the Authors Guild at the LAE Congress, and they said that they took they infringed my draw. They took also my text. It's not imitating really, because it's not a pastiche. It's really my drawing. For now, there is no I don't know cases, no suits in France, but it's really a big threat, and every people talk about that. It's true. Not in the creative sector, but everywhere. Then what we do, exactly, effectiveness, we did as we do when it's very urgent, a huge crisis. We gathered with all creative and cultural industries. It's a collective. It gathered graphic and plastic, art, audiovisual, film, games, books, music, and press sector. And it's syndicates, unions, and also CMOs. And in the autumn of 2023, we asked, because we were aware about this AI Act, because the regulation in Europe take place 2 years before. And we ask data transparency, and we ask also the enforcement of copyright obligations by this firm. But we were surprised also to see that the French government said, "Oh no, we don't want to push this transparency of data because we are we took the trend very lately, and we need to be innovative, and we need because we have Mistral AI, and Mistral AI is a new French startup. In Germany, I think it was also a problem with Aleph Alpha. Well, we get you can go we get the regulation. In fact, in February, the Parliament and Commission and the Union say, okay, we are going to include for copyright a transparency obligation. This is good. And we can sources with data. We can get a sufficiently detailed summary. We don't know yet what it means, but we need to know what kind of work has been feeding the machine. And if it's not good, we can opt out. And when we opt out, we get the exclusive right back. Then we can licensing. You know, it's very different, as you know, with the American, because you have fair use. But here we get, in fact, like confirmation that data mining could be used for this kind of feeding machine of this act. The reproduction could be covered by this exemption. I say could be because some teacher says, copyright lawyer said, no, it's not. So we're not clear about this definition. But in the IE Act, they will provide a European office responsible for verifying the proper application of the IE Act. You know, there is not only copyright, it's a democracy. There is a higher risk of democracy, and financial penalties could be also applied for copyright infringement. And you see, it's third person. It's not a lot when you say about billions. Well, we'll see. But the regulation in Europe is like that, and it could be effective in 2026. Next, please. Then during this debate, we have also the French touch. What we mean, it's yes, the government say, okay, we have to make a commission, and it did. The commission created on the artificial intelligence with lawyers like Alexandra Ben-Samoun, which is she runs the commission for copyright, artists, experts, and they delivered the report at the same time with the regulation of the EA Act. Then what did it say? Please, the next one. They said that it's a bit similar, but we need to identify human creation. I like the text because it's very abstract. It's irreducible character which stems from its originality and deserves distinction and protection. Yes, we are human. But before I know it was moral right, in fact. And I think it's very important to push the moral right, because all of us, we have moral rights and integrity, paternity, attribution of your, and also the opt-out could be in the moral right already. And a fair remuneration of human creation. Thank you. Yes, it's a very essential, of course. And we do not know how it's going for this remuneration. And of course, the report gives the obligation of transparency, and also they decided to make, under the supervision of the Ministry of Culture, a bureau who will be an office who will facilitate contact between AI developers and right holders. Why? Because in fact, the report is in favor of technological revolution, because France would like to get also progress and growth, and you know, there is a lot of promise, a lot of game changing, and the economy is not so good, and we knew that the startup, there is a lot of promise, yes. Then facilitating the condition of the use of data, encouraging licensing. Yes, this is the report. This is the way of French politics going on. And please, the next one. at the last news, Le Monde, it's the press publisher in Le Monde, has an agreement with OpenAI. And in France, the decision of competitive authority de la concurrence have sanctioned Google's 250 million euro because it took all the press data without his consent. Then this is two examples that you see in the press publishing. There are already bargain, and they are already very close to the startup and to this Gemini and Google, and they already have agreement. But in our sector and it would be the next and the last slide, thank you. Yes, the last things I could say, because it's like 15 days before, 1 week before, the French Minister of Agriculture, Ms. Rachida Dati, announced the creation of a think tank because we need to examine the conditions for remuneration offers. In which context could we have this fair remuneration? We don't know yet, in fact. Maybe it could be, as you said, compulsory licensing, because why? If you're a lawyer like me, you say, there is an exemption, you can opt out, you can get back your exclusive right. Well, now I'm going to deal with a firm, but you can do also an exemption. It's not really an exemption. There is too much criterion to say it's create harms, it's create uncompetitive business, and it could be too much, and you know, with a free step state, we can say, no, it's not good. Maybe it will be the answer of a juridical EC judgment. But nowadays we think about publishers who said, I'm going to make an opt-out without the consent of the author. We don't know yet because it's not in the agreement, but we have to talk about that. That's why Sofia, who bother publishers and authors, will engage a task force, and we have to think about our own interest, because when it happens for the public lending right, when it happens for the private digital copy, we were together. And I think the battle will be better if we are together and to think about what we are going to do. Are we going to let the robot feeding our works? We are not sure. A lot of publishers and authors are against that. Totally against. Then it's really a new debate, and I'm very happy to hear about you, because you are very engaged in the future, and it's more clear for me now, maybe the direction to take. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Florence. Next up is Josefine from Sweden.
Hello, is it on? No? Yeah, okay, great. I'm Josefine Engström, and I'm the president of the Swedish Association of Illustrators and Graphic Designers. We're called Svenska Tecknare in Swedish. And you can jump to the next slide when you want to, and that's me. And then you can go again. Yeah, so Svenska Tecknare, in Sweden, we were very early on, very engaged in this AI situation that we're now finding ourselves in. And we have been basically spending the whole year on working with this issue on in several different ways. But we were also the first cultural creators organization in Sweden to set out an official position on AI and copyright, where we looked at the existing copyright laws in Europe, and from that we sort of took a stance. And we released that in relation to, it was released in relation to a debate article in the biggest newspaper in Sweden, which we're very happy about, because that actually got us a bit of sort of attention from the public, also understanding that what's happening is actually completely kosher, so to speak. But and this strategy was also then used as a base for our umbrella organizations. In Sweden, we're very lucky to be, as in many Nordic countries, we're very lucky to be used to working with collective licenses. And that also makes us work. We have quite tight collaborations between the organizations through that. But we also have a joint association, which has a more sort of political focus, which is called CLIS. And within CLIS, we're now working together to try and affect politicians. We're trying to make them hear us. We're not doing very well. I mean, they invite us all the time. We're always invited. Not always, but quite often. I think it's the third time now we're going to something within like just this spring. They're inviting us to come and tell our side of things, but then they of course won't act on it. And also they can't do much because we're all within the EU, and as we just heard, the AI Act is here and we are obliged to follow whatever it says, basically. However, if we're looking at the AI Act, I think it's astonishing or baffling to see how they're treating the ownership of creative people. I can't say that they would treat any other sort of ownership in the same sort of way. And I think it's especially baffling if you look at the recitals in the AI Act. It's completely, they're completely aware of that this will mean really bad things for us creative people, but they're still then making an exception. So they say that anyone's welcome to scrape the internet if you want to, basically. And so you were talking about how the opt-out option is there for us. And Svenska Tecknare is we're just now investigating how that would actually work on a practical level. And we're also sort of looking into that within through the joint associations as well. And now you can change slide. But if you look at an image maker, this is one of our most famous illustrators in Sweden called Jan Lööf. And his work can be found on over 200 websites. And to the practicality of him making all those people who have posted his images online, that he would make them do the opt-out in a machine readable way. I mean, it's not plausible, it's impractical, it doesn't work. And in Sweden, we have a bit of different situation when it comes to authors, for example, and also when it comes to musicians, and also if you create educational programs, because then you're usually behind, the work is usually behind a licensing. Sorry? No, that's not what I meant. I meant that you have, it doesn't become a lawful source because you have to pay for do you know what I'm saying? No, you know. Okay, I'm going to try and explain myself. This is all a lawful source because you can just Google it. But if I would go, for example, if I want to use music, I have to go to Spotify and I have to pay for it. So it's not a lawful source. So in Sweden, we don't have the same problem as you seem to do with Amazon and all these copies just being put up, or the AI works just being put up. So in Sweden, what we have discovered is that it's mainly the image makers that we're in most trouble, so to speak, because it's much easier to get to our works in a lawful way. But so we're now looking into, despite that, we're looking into if there's ways of making it possible to opt out. And if it's possible to opt out, then it would also be possible to create a licensing system. And as we already have quite good systems for that in Sweden, that would the actual practicality of that wouldn't be a problem. But as the ground problem it's still there. I mean, Jan Lööf, he can never if he opts out from his own website, who would then go and ask him to, could I please use your work for my AI training system, when they can go to a free website? You know, it's not plausible, or it's not realistic. But anyhow, the other problem with this AI Act and the opt-out option is that if we would opt out, that would mean that we would opt out for all text and data mining. So if we would opt out from all text and data mining, it would be counterproductive to the innovation that they're looking for, basically. And they haven't thought of that either, I think. So a lot of the text and data mining is not actually a threat to us. It's just a generative AI that's a threat to us. So that's also, I mean, it's a little bit, I mean, they haven't thought the whole way, I think. And then, as you were also talking about the 3-step test, I think that's also quite astonishing that they haven't like, they passed a law that's actually breaking international laws. I mean, that's quite surprising, I'd say. Anyhow, in Sweden, there's as I was saying, we're investigating how to do the opt-outs and not. And there are one organization called Swedish Association of Educational Writers, and they made an opt-out on behalf of all their members. But what they're now, so that created quite a stir because the publishers got very upset because they also see that they have some rights in the material that's being produced, of course. And now what's happening is basically they're standing there with the opt-out, but they can't do anything about it. So now they're waiting for the rest of us to opt out so we can start licensing, but we're saying we don't believe in licensing. And even if there would be licensing, as we were talking about earlier, the problem is still that it would never reimburse us for the loss that we will experience. I mean, if you have 5 billion images into Mid-Journey, how are you on earth going to give money to the individuals? It's unrealistic, that as well. So anyhow, so they opted out, and shall we be quite honest with what we think about the opting out? Shall we? Okay, let's be honest. So what we thought about this is that it's all fine that they did the opt-out on behalf of their members. However, what they did not do is that they didn't say, we do not agree with the text and data mining exception. And what happened in Denmark is that Coda did the same thing. They opted out for all their members, but they said, we don't believe in the text and data mining exception. We don't think that that's actually a lawful thing to do. However, we're doing this to be on the safe side. And that's sort of what they missed. And that's created some confusion, to be honest. Yeah, I think we can move past that one. And then in Sweden in general, we, as you might know or not know, we're now stuck with a right-wing government for probably some time to come. And they have, as we will see here, they have the same sort of money in front of their eyes, hoping that they will become very innovative in relation to AI and that they will earn lots of money. And they are apparently, that we found out through when we had a meeting with one of the politicians that we've met with, they're completely aware of that a lot of people will lose their jobs, but they have not made a plan for what to do with that. And that is also something that I think is really astonishing. I mean, we have on one part, we have the AI that's going to save us, but no one's going to be afford to buy anything because everyone's going to be unemployed. I mean, it's not a future for us. Anyhow, what they did as well, the government, is to set up an AI commission, and they're going to set that up. They're working on doing that. And we've noticed that there's no representatives from the creative side, no one talking about copyright within that commission. But CLIS, this joint association that we're planning to have a meeting with them, of course, and sort of tell them about the importance of them keeping a sound creative industry in the country. And as I said, since we're bound by the EU AI Act, there's not so much we can do on a national level, except nagging everyone about how wrong it is, which we're doing all the time. But what we're going to do now within CLIS is that we've decided to talk about best practice when it comes to the research article, Article 3, because as you were telling us, there you can't opt out from the research TDM, but there is a writing about that they need to adhere. They need to have a dialogue about best practice. So that's what we're trying to start. We're going to start that and hope that maybe someone will consider us. I don't know if I had, no, that was the same thing. Let me just see if I've forgotten anything, because now I was talking so much. I'm sorry. No, I think that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, great. And now for our final presentation of the day. Sorry, you have to go last. We will hear from, I'm not going to say your name right still, Sihawukele.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also greetings to everyone here in the house. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues from Africa, from Botswana, Mr. Makwinja and Me Malikongwe, who is the chairperson of FANFABO. FANFABO stands for Academic and Nonfiction Authors Association of Botswana. And Mr. Makwinja is also from the Collective Management Organization, Society of Botswana. And also acknowledge Professor Msevere from Zimbabwe, who's online. She's been with us since the beginning of the day today. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here. And after listening to all the presentation this afternoon, I can see that we are lagging far behind from where you are and the rest of the people who spoke today. So my contribution is just to give you an overview of the state of artificial intelligence in South Africa. Maybe I should also inform you that the inaugural AI summit is only due this month. So nothing has been happening since 5 years from now. We haven't started with this. So my introduction is giving you an overview of how AI can have an impact on the productivity, which acts as a catalyst to economic growth and development whilst utilizing available resource to increase production. So it is going to have an impact on the production in South Africa. It will provide employment opportunities, better wages, and improve economic conditions. For us in South Africa, a more productive economy could also mean higher income that directly elevate people's standards of living and quality of life. So research conducted by the World Bank ranked South Africa 80th out of 170 countries for productivity growth in 2015-2021. During this period, the rate of local productivity growth is measured by the GDP per employed person was only 2/3 of the pace seen globally. So that is why I'm saying we are far behind. Can we have the next slide? So as South Africa heads towards its 17th democratic national election, understanding the levels that impact national productivity is critical for the new decision makers to achieve optimum productivity. Annual real GDP increased by 0.6% in 2023, following an increase of 19% in 1.9% in 2022. So the increase was primarily led by higher economic activities in finance, real estate, and business services, which contributed 0.4% of percentage points based on growth of 1.8%, transport, storage, and communication, which contributes 0.3% of the percentage point. Utilizing artificial intelligence will change the country's economic growth in the next 5 years or so. That's my prediction. Can we have the yes? So coming to the South African artificial intelligence, generally South Africa's interest in AI increased by 370% over the last year and 650% over the last 5 years. So according to Google Insight released by search engines, 91% of South Africans think that life with AI will look different 5 years from now. I don't know whether this prediction is correct, but accessing information is made easy through AI for education at work. Technology companies, academic institutions, and the government are at the forefront of the development of AI in South Africa. The potential impact of AI and generative AI across healthcare, education, finance, inclusion, and agricultural, through still it's in early stages. It has already emerged, but is still in its very early stages. It has become one of the most important technologies of our time. The launch of ChatGPT last year, with its underlying language models, AI technology, brought to public attention on the power of generative AI technology. You can see for yourself that we are still very, very at initial stage. AI may leverage very large amounts of proprietary data and then support data-led decision-making. It is viewed by many as a strong tool to transform the lives of South African citizens on one hand, and yet on another hand, it threatens jobs, as we have heard from the previous presentations. There's a strong feeling that there will be job losses that will lead to increased poverty if it is not well managed. The use of AI brings transformative possibilities in certain areas of technologies. South Africa should look into risk associated with AI to realize its benefits. So as I said earlier, I won't dwell much on this. This is just the potential targeted areas where AI can play an impactful role. AI may have an impact in easing societal challenges in 4 key areas, like I've mentioned before: healthcare, education, financial inclusion, and agriculture. Both public and private sectors are involved in providing healthcare, with 70% and public 30%. Next slide. The key issues facing the healthcare system include obstacles to accessing care and affordable medicines, variable qualities in the care provided, inadequate funding, and insufficient staff complement, mainly in the public sector. In 2019, South Africa registered a doctor-patient ratio of 0.8% doctors per 1,000 people. So you can see the overview of how far we are. Can we move to the next one? I did mention this. Education, it is also going to have an impact. because we have in South Africa, we have disparities between private and public schools. Public schools suffer teacher shortages and underfunding, especially in the rural areas such as Nongoma and Kanyagote, which is in the northern parts of the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And among the public schools, there are marked differences according to their location, students' background, class sizes, and lack of tuition fees. Although most of such schools are no-fee schools, they are still constrained in funding education. So this is due to some pandemics that we have experienced before HIV and COVID. Next slide. There is strong evidence of poverty and inequality that cause learners to lose concentration in classes due to issues I highlighted above. AI, therefore, with the provision of access to the internet and computers and digitization material, can improve the education system in South Africa. AI may be used for policy, curricula, and content creation for all governments to make informed policy decisions and also create syllabi and learning materials. And it can also be used in classroom planning. Next slide. Also, another targeted area is the financial inclusion. South Africa has experienced positive results in financial inclusion, but more remains to be done to improve people's financial literacy, money management, and access to economic opportunities. And according to recent surveys, 20% of adults lack a basic bank account, with a disproportionate number being women, people living in rural areas, and people from lower income households. So the country is facing a surge in ATM bombings, digital banking fraud, and other financial crimes that are costing the banking industry and customers billions of rands a year. So we have experienced cyber crimes, robberies, hijack. I'm sure you read about all of these things, which I think we are losing billions of rand through online banking, attacks on ATMs, bank robberies, and also fraud. And AI can transform financial services by deploying AI-powered chatbots to handle routine clients' queries and reduce some digital fraudulent crimes in South Africa. And also another sector which I want to dwell in it is agriculture. I think that is where the most the economic contribution, which is about 2.5% of the GDP, comes from the agriculture. And if we employ AI tools, this can also cause a difference. Next slide. AI may be a strong tool to transform and monitor systems in South Africa if it becomes legal and brings forth new opportunities to its citizens. So what we have learned is that there is a need for an appropriate legislation framework which needs to be developed to define standards, priorities, and ethical boundaries, and also to support the growth of AI adoption and mitigate AI risk. A technical team of scientists and experts from relevant industries, including academia, should work with government agencies to develop all proposed regulations to enable an optimal and accountable environment for all. I think listening to the presentation today, I think we will make it once we have set the ball rolling. So the idea is supported by ICT legal expert at ENS Africa, Ridwan Roda, Era Gunning, and also Lyndon Tulu, who prompted the debate following the European Parliament passing of the Artificial Intelligence Act on 13 March 2024. This can be achieved through collaboration between public and private partnership, public and private sector and academia to ensure free access to AI so that it does not benefit the elite few. Other alternatives will be development finance institutions that will provide financial support and investment opportunities to local business and research institutes. This effort may lead to the facilitation of partnership between international tech companies and local organizations, promoting knowledge exchange and capacity building. Additionally, Academic and Non-Fiction Authors Association, which I'm the president of the association, and I'm also the chairperson of DALRO in South Africa. We are based in Johannesburg. I think our organization can organize workshops, webinars, or seminars to educate authors about AI technologies relevant to writing, emphasizing the importance of using AI in a responsible and a fair manner. Simultaneously, ANFASA advocate for ethical guidelines and standards regarding the use of AI in writing and publishing. This dual approach involves lobbying policymakers and industry stakeholders to ensure that AI technologies are used responsibly and ethically, with proper consideration given to issues such as author rights, copyright, and transparency. Once we have AI infrastructure in place, AI will be positioned with minimized risk and maximum equitability to play a transformative, beneficial role across key aspects of South African society. South Africa has launched the Artificial Intelligence Institute and AI hubs at the University of Johannesburg, Tshwane University of Technology, and several other universities in South Africa, like University of Cape Town, University of the Witwatersrand, which is engaged in AI research through the School of Computer Science and Applied Mathematics. And other universities include Stellenbosch, University of Pretoria, and Durban University of Technology. So you can see that we are still starting to engage the country through this. Can we go back to my final slide? So in closing, the above profile should be used as a platform for more dialogue and debates on how a legislative framework may be developed to mitigate the risk of AI in South Africa. These insights provide a glimpse into the ongoing AI project within South African universities, and more information is accessible on the website of these institutions and from their respective research departments. And my conviction is that more forums and platforms of this nature must be encouraged across the globe, and attending academics, conferences, seminars on AI in South Africa can offer a valuable insight into the latest development in the field. Thank you very much. I was also requested to just give you a few updates on the copyright amended bill, which I'm sure you are all aware of. And I want to thank the International Authors Forum for your support in the petition against this copyright amendment bill, because it utilizes the clause in fair use instead of fair dealing. So we are totally against the bill. Most of the professional associations in South Africa signed a petition, and we had the majority of authors presenting the petition in the parliament in Cape Town. And we also included your statement as the International Authors Forum, which I think the president may or may not sign the bill. We are just hoping that at the end of the day, the president will reconsider the bill to be taken back to the National Assembly. But you may never guarantee that, because we are heading for national elections. So as part of the campaign for the ruling government, ANC, he might sign the bill, which is going to be detrimental to authors and publishers and other professional associations in South Africa. So we appeal for any help from anyone who sympathizes with authors, because I think if this bill is passed, it will mean that there will be no reason for collecting societies, because we won't license anything. Like in the case of Daro, I think we'll close shops if that goes ahead. And also for authors, the authors' rights will be infringed, because we always expect that the government should legislate to protect their rights, but now their intellectual property is not protected at all if we adopt the fair use clause. So I think that's where we are at the moment. After the petition was presented, the majority of the members of parliament voted for the signing of the bill. So it has already passed in the National Assembly. So what we have done, we have formulated a coalition of authors and also of the publishers, and Daro is also amongst the groups of the coalition, which is planning to appeal the decision to the Constitutional Court. And I think there will be legal fees that we need to pay. Like each member pays about 300,000 rands. I don't know if you convert 300,000 rands, how much in dollar is that? It's far less than what it looks like. And this is where we are with the copyright amendment bill. Unfortunately, our managing director, Lazarus Sirobe, is taken ill. Today is in hospital. We are supposed to be here and present our case to us. And I think we also invite prayers for Lazarus. It's very hard to be ill in a foreign country like this one, and it's far from his family. And it's quite, I don't know what will be the outcome of the procedure today, but this is what we have planned, that he was going to give you an overview of where we are. But I think I've covered what is taking place right now. Thank you very much.